Hi folks, HR Funk here with number 44 in my series on Law Enforcement Qualification Course Challenge videos. Now if you've not seen any of the videos in this series up to this point, what I'm attempting to do is to fire a law enforcement firearms qualification course from each of the 50 states for the purpose of comparing and contrasting those courses and ultimately trying to determine what I think is the best law enforcement firearms qualification course in the country. Now this series does focus on duty handgun qualification courses, and in the future I might do another series on rifle and shotgun qualifications. And today's duty handgun qualification comes to us from the state of Washington. Washington uses a 42 round course of fire to qualify officers with their firearms in that state, and that course is divided into 7 stages. The stages take place at distances as close as 3 yards from the target and as far away as 25 yards from the target. In terms of scoring, the shooter's score is determined by where their shots strike the target. And you'll notice this target has different colored areas on it, and the different colors represent different point values. Shots striking in this light gray area to include this even lighter area here and the white area in the very center of the target receive a value of 10 points. Shots striking outside of that area, but in the light blue area here, receive a value of 7 points, and any shots striking the dark blue area at the very edge of the target receive a value of 3 points. If a shooter has any shots that strike off the silhouette, that results in a 10-point deduction from that shooter's score. In terms of firing a passing score, the shooter has to achieve a score of at least 294 points out of the possible 420 points. That gives this course a qualification standard of 70%. And it's time to meet today's challenger. For this Washington course, I'm going to be using a Glock 17 Generation 5. And as some of you know, I'm not a big fan of the Glock pistols, but in an interest to be fair, I am going to try this pistol on the Washington course. Now, some of you have been telling me over the years that I need to try the new Glocks to see if I like them better than the older ones. And this is a Generation 5, so it's the latest generation of the Glock pistols that I'm going to be trying for this Washington course. And I did use another Glock all the way back in August of 2019. I believe I used that for the Indiana course, and that was video number 12 or so in this series. So I'm going to be trying the latest, greatest Glock 17 on the Washington course. And I'm going to get it loaded up and ready to go, and we'll see how it does. 2 quick things before I start the course, folks. First is the one course that I still need to complete this series is a course from West Virginia. I have courses from all the other 50 states, but that's the one state I still don't have a course from. And my understanding is that West Virginia does not have a statewide mandatory qualification course. Rather, they have a set of guidelines, and then each individual department designs their own course around those guidelines. So if any of you have access to a course of fire used by an individual agency and you can get that to me, please let me know in the comments section. And if anyone in that agency is concerned about having their course get out and having someone be upset with them, I don't divulge the course, or I don't divulge where the course comes from when it comes from a local jurisdiction. So I'll just use it as a representative of the West Virginia course. The other thing I want to point out has to do with holsters. Now, every once in a while, somebody takes me to task on one of these videos because I'm not using a security holster. And there have been some videos that I've fired where the particular holster I have for that individual firearm is not a security quote-unquote holster. I don't have a retention holster for each and every type of firearm that I've used in these courses. Most of the time, I do have a holster with some sort of retention device, just like today. This holster does have a retention device. Now, I can release it anytime I want to, but many times what you see as a holster that I'm using might not appear to have a retention device, but it actually does. So as much as I can, I'm playing fair on these videos and using some sort of a security holster. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the Washington handgun qualification course. And I'm loaded up and ready to go. The first stage of this Washington course takes place at a distance of 3 yards from the target, and from this distance, on the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw and fire 2 rounds into the body of the target in a time limit of 4 seconds. Stages 2 and 3 of this course take place at a distance of 5 yards from the target. And from that distance, the shooter fires basically the same drill. The first time the shooter stands facing to the left of the target, and on the signal to fire, the shooter has to pivot to his or her right, draw, and fire 2 rounds into the body of the target in a time limit of 5 seconds. The shooter then faces the opposite direction with their left side facing toward the target. On a signal to fire, the shooter has to pivot to their left, draw, and fire 2 more rounds into the body of the target, also in a time limit of 5 seconds. For stage 4, the shooter is back to a distance of 7 yards from the target. And from that distance, on the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw and fire 6 rounds into the body of the target in a time limit of 15 seconds. But one of the rounds loaded into the shooter's magazine is a dummy round. So the shooter is going to have to perform a malfunction clearing drill during the course of firing those 6 rounds. So as usual, when I have a course like this, or a stage like this I should say, I'm going to start out with 1 live round in the magazine, and then I'm going to just randomly mix my dummy round in with the other live rounds, and I'm going to load them into the magazine so that I can't see which round is which. So I won't know when I'm going to encounter the dummy round, and I will have to perform my malfunction clearing. Magazine goes in the pistol, and I'm set up and ready to go. So let's see how this drill goes. And on we go to stage 5. For stage 5, the shooter is back to a distance of 10 yards from the target, and from that distance, on the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw and fire 6 rounds into the body of the target, then perform a mandatory reload and fire 6 more rounds into the body of the target, all in a time limit of 35 seconds. For stage 6, the shooter is back to a distance of 15 yards from the target. And from that distance, on the signal to fire, the shooter has to draw and once again fire 6 rounds into the body of the target from a standing position, then kneel down, perform a mandatory reload, and fire 6 more rounds into the body of the target from the kneeling position. The time limit once again is 35 seconds, which seems kind of curious because that's the same time limit we had from 10 yards, only this time we're adding 5 more yards of distance and also requiring the shooter to kneel while the reload is performed and then fire from the kneeling position. So that seems like a generous time limit to begin with, and I assume that it is 35 seconds to accommodate revolver shooters who are going through this qualification, but still, even for revolver shooters, that's a long time to fire out 12 rounds and perform a reload. In any case, that's what the course calls for, so that's what I'm about to shoot. Final stage of this Washington course, folks, and this takes place at a distance of 25 yards from the target. And on this stage, the shooter begins behind cover. On a signal to fire, the shooter has to fire 3 rounds into the body of the target from the left-hand side of cover, then move behind cover, perform a mandatory speed reload, and then fire 3 more rounds into the body of the target from the right side of cover. The shooter then moves back behind cover and performs a tactical reload, meaning they're going to retain the magazine that was just in the pistol that they were firing, which still has ammunition in, and replace that with a fresh magazine. The entire exercise has a time limit of 60 seconds. Still waiting on that 60 seconds to run out. There we go. And that's the Washington course, folks. In the end, I had 1 shot that made it out into the 7-point area. I had another one that tried to make it out there, but it broke the line, which according to the Washington rules means it gets the next higher scoring value, which makes that a 10. All the rest of the shots are 10s. So if my math is correct, I ended up with a 99.3% on this course. I think I can live with that. Now, the course itself isn't necessarily bad, but there are some things about it that seem sort of dated to me, and I have a feeling that at least some of this course goes back to the era when most police officers carried revolvers. One of the things that I already mentioned are the time limits in the reloading stages. Also, the heavy emphasis on reloading. We had 3 different stages out of 7 that required a reload. And if you're carrying a 6-shot revolver, reloading is going to be much more important than if you're carrying a 17-shot Glock 17. Also, the stages all had either 6 shots or 3 shots that were fired, so multiples of 3, which again really goes with a 6-shot revolver more so than a semi-auto pistol. The course in and of itself isn't really bad. We had some close range shooting. We fired all the way back to 25 yards. We did have the reloading. We had a malfunction clearing stage, so there's something that harkens from the semi-auto era. But there are a lot of things that weren't in this course that we've seen in a lot of the other courses. There was no failure drill. There was no ambidextrous right and left hand only shooting. There was no shooting and moving. There were no talking to the targets, nothing like that. So I think this, in its current state, is sort of a middle-of-the-road course, but I really think it could be updated to be a better course. Like I said, it's not bad as it is, I just think it could be better. And here's one last look at today's Challenger. The Generation 5 Glock 17 performed very well in this test, and even so, I've got to say, I still don't care for it. I just don't like the way this grip doesn't fit my hand, and I notice it when I'm holding it, when I point it, and I just don't care for it. That's my biggest complaint with the Glocks. They don't point naturally for me. They don't fit my hand. This one does seem to be a little bit easier to reach the magazine release than some of the older ones, and I'm not really criticizing the pistol. It's a good pistol. It obviously did very well in this course. I just don't care for it myself, and there are other pistols that I prefer to it. And that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you order anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.